All right. Well, hello and welcome. My name is Krista Harding. I am a senior manager on the community engagement team at the National MS Society. I am excited to be here with you tonight for our quarterly Pediatric MS Navigating Your Journey program. Before we get started with our topic this evening, I want to provide to you a brief overview of pediatric MS. So let's start with some general information. Before you or your child were diagnosed with MS, you may not have known anyone with MS, or you may not have even heard it before. We learned from a study published in 2019 that nearly 1 million people live with MS in the United States, and there are 2.8 million people worldwide living with it. It's estimated that fewer than 5,000 children and teens live with MS in the US, and fewer than 10,000 teens live with MS worldwide. So, what exactly is MS? MS is a disease of the nervous system, which includes your brain, the spinal cord on your back, and your optic nerves, which connect your eyes to your brain. In MS, the body accidentally attacks normal cells called myelin, and when that is damaged, it's difficult for nerve cells to send and receive information to and from the brain. One way to imagine this is to think about when a phone charging cord is damaged. If the outside coating isn't doing its job, the wires underneath might not work as they should, and charging may even become slower. So, like the charging cord, damage to myelin may slow down the messages your brain is sending to the rest of your body. These attacks produce something called lesions, which can cause symptoms of MS. We don't yet know what causes MS, but researchers are working hard to figure it out. We know that you don't get MS directly from your parents, and that some of your DNA, called genes, may make you more likely to get MS. Genes are the blueprint instructions that make up your body and determine things like the color of your hair, skin, and eyes, and how tall you are. Genes can increase the chances of getting MS, but is not the only reason why people get MS. So, what does that mean if someone close to you has MS? We know that if your mother or father has MS, you have a 1.5% chance of getting MS. If your sibling has MS, your chance of getting MS is 2.7%. We do know that women are 3 times more likely to have MS than men. We also know that MS is more common from the further away you get from the equator. We know that having low vitamin D levels, being overweight as a kid, smoking or living with someone who smokes, or having been sick with mono could make you more likely to have MS. However, it's important to know there is nothing you or your parents did that caused you to get MS. In fact, scientists believe that getting MS is caused by a combination of factors, and many of them are completely out of your control. We don't yet know what causes MS, but researchers are working hard to figure it out. What we do know is that you can live a long and happy life. There are 4 types of MS, but for young people, relapsing remitting MS is most common. People with relapsing remitting MS feel fine, but then have periods when their symptoms last more than a day and feel much stronger. Those periods are called relapses, but some people call them exacerbations, attacks, or flare-ups. All these words mean the same thing, a time when your MS makes you feel worse. Even though relapses last longer than a day, you will feel better once they end. Most young people recover well from relapses, and relapses don't necessarily cause permanent change. There's nothing you did wrong that made you have a relapse, and some medicines can help you manage them. MS can make your body feel strange, and everyone's experience with MS is different. Sometimes your vision might become blurry, your hands might tingle, or your foot feels numb for a while. Some of you might feel really tired every day, or like you can't focus at school, and others might feel sad or worry or be in a bad mood a lot. Maybe you feel a couple of these together, and maybe they are symptoms that come and go. All of this is normal with MS. There are things you can do to help your body feel good, like eating nutritious foods and being active. And even though we don't yet have a cure for MS, there are medicines you can take to help, both for your body and for your mind. Your doctor might also prescribe a disease-modifying therapy to treat your MS. The goal of these medications is to prevent MS from getting worse by preventing new damage, those lesions we talked about earlier, from being formed. The medicine might not make someone feel better, and because of that, they might not want to take it sometimes. But it is constantly working inside their body to help stop them from having new changes or relapses in the future. They may not even notice that it's doing its job, but it is. MS medicine will work the best when someone starts taking it as soon as they find out they have MS and continues to take it regularly as prescribed by their doctor. Because everyone's MS is different, medicines work differently for each person too. So your doctors might want to try a few different kinds right away or in the future. No matter which one you choose, the best medicine for you is the one that you, your parents, and your doctors decide is the right fit to help you feel as good as possible. And remember, if you're living with MS, no matter how old you are, the way you feel about your MS treatment matters. Your doctors want to know how you're feeling and your experience with your MS medicines. Your opinions are important, and I would encourage you to be an active part of your own care team by regularly speaking up. So with that, I'm excited to move on to the presentation, this quarter's program topic, Pediatric MS Research. Let's meet our presenters this evening. Dr. Kathy Zackowski is the Associate Vice President for Research at the National MS Society in the U.S. She manages the Society's research portfolio on clinical and rehabilitation care. In addition, Dr. Zackowski serves on the scientific leadership team of the International Progressive MS Alliance. Prior to being at the Society, she was at Johns Hopkins School of Medicine as an associate professor, where her laboratory focused on investigating mechanisms that underlie sensory motor impairments and disability resulting from damage to the central nervous system, and she worked as a clinician providing occupational therapy to individuals with multiple sclerosis. Sara Loud is the Chief Executive Officer at Accelerated Cure Project, also known as ACP. ACP is a nonprofit organization that is focused on accelerating research in multiple sclerosis so that people living with the disease can get faster diagnoses and more effective treatments, and that MS can be cured. ACP is particularly interested in making sure that MS research focuses on the needs and priorities of those who know the disease best, those living with the disease and their caregivers. People affected by MS are involved at all stages of research through ACP, including deciding what research questions are asked, how studies are designed, how study success is measured, and how research results are disseminated. And finally, Nikita Shukla is an assistant professor at Baylor College of Medicine, Texas Children's Hospital. She specializes in pediatric MS neuroimmunology and is the head of the neuroimmunology MS clinic at Texas Children's, as well as the director of the Neuroimmunology MS Fellowship Program at TCH BCM. She's involved in clinical research through the network of pediatric MS centers, as well as an ongoing clinical trial for which she is a site PI. So, with that in mind, Kathy, I'd love for you to get us started tonight. Can you tell us why research is so important and what purpose does it serve?
Thank you. Yes, I'd love to. So research is very near and dear to my heart. So I feel like many people find research very dry. So my hope today is that I can share some exciting things that we're learning and why it's so important that we study MS as well as treat it. So I thought I would start by just defining what the society calls a cure, because there are cures. And so, just as it says, as the experience of living with MS is different for every person, including children, every person's cure may look different. So, whether that means being able to get back on your bike, an MRI with no new lesions, or knowing your child will never hear the words you have MS, cures for MS are now within reach. And so I think this statement is so critical because it epitomizes to me why research is important. Really, we would not have any idea how to treat MS if we did not have researched up to this point. Research is really the only way that we can come to a greater understanding of the mechanisms that cause it, and testing ideas for how to treat it, so that our children who have MS are given options, just as the adults are. I really emphasize that just research is the key to making that happen. So if we go to the next slide, I want to talk about some differences. I get asked quite often, what is the difference between pediatric MS research and adult research or general MS research? So I wanted to go through a couple of things that I think of that are key differences between research focused on children and adults. So first is even just the design or the study design. So pediatric research may require kind of specialized study designs to accommodate children's unique needs. Like we have to use age appropriate questionnaires. We have to adapt procedures to be less invasive. And we have to consider developmental factors when interpreting the results that we get. There are also ethical complexities. So before we do any study, we have to have um, a person who's participating sign an informed consent. And so this obtaining informed consent from children is more complicated because it requires parental consent. And sometimes a child has to also assent to doing this study. It all depends on the age of the child, but it adds kind of extra ethical layers to research that you might do with an adult, and with good reason. But it's important to keep all of that in mind. There are also developmental considerations. So pediatric research has to consider the different developmental stages or milestones of children from infancy to adolescence, which impact how data is collected and how it's interpreted. So while adult research usually focuses on a more stable adult physiology, studying children requires that the researcher understand these developmental milestones and keep them in mind as they're developing their study and asking their questions. In addition, there are physiological differences. So children have very different body compositions. I mean, for one, it's just a smaller volume of a person, right? There's also differences in metabolism, differences in how organs function compared to adults, which means that medications and treatments may need to be studied and adjusted based on that person's age and developmental stage. Research also offers the opportunity to study MS mechanisms in a more pure model. And what I mean by that is children don't have as many comorbidities or as many other health other health issues yet, right? So as we reach adulthood, we all tend to accumulate other issues. And so as a child with MS, they have a more pure model of what MS is. So pediatric research can help us understand adult MS and the cause of MS more, um, just by studying it in this pediatric model. And so the idea, many researchers actually think that studying children with MS is really the way we're going to come to an understanding or a cure for MS. So I'm happy to take questions, but those are the things that I think of that are different in pediatric research versus adult. And now I think the next, I'm handing this off to Sara to talk with us a little bit more about pediatric research.
Yes, thanks, Kathy. So we know that there are still a lot of unanswered questions about living with MS, about treatments, and about the impacts of the disease. But there are some questions for which there is already evidence out there. And we hear from folks all the time about, well, how do I find the evidence that is good evidence? What does it mean to be good evidence? And how do I figure out what to do with the information that's out there? And so I guess I would start, and you'll hear this in a couple of my slides here, to always rely on trusted sources. So go to your healthcare provider, go to advocacy organizations such as the Society or other MS-specific organizations that you might be involved in, and ask what the most current research evidence is on pediatric MS, or if there's any evidence out there for your specific question. The kind of gold standard place to go for research studies that are published is a website called PubMed. And so you can go to PubMed and you can search on there for things like pediatric MS, and you can see here that I included a search of exactly that. And you'll also notice from that little graph, that histogram in the middle on the left-hand side, that there's been an increase in the number of studies and the number of publications related to pediatric MS, which is great news. But But there are real challenges associated with accessing information, even if you go to PubMed and you click on something that's of interest to you. First of all, they're not always free, although there is a movement towards making things more openly accessible. And even if they are free, they can be very challenging to understand. They're not written, I'm not a scientist. They're not written for people like me or for some of you on the call who are not scientists as well. They're written for primarily for other scientists. And again, there is a movement underway to make research information more readily accessible and to make it more understandable. So sometimes you'll see a layperson summary of a study, or you'll see that another organization, such as the Society or Accelerated Cure Project, has taken a study and tried to rewrite it or rewrite the outcomes of that study in such a way to make it more digestible and more actionable for folks like you and me. Um, One thing that's really important to remember when you're reading studies or when you're thinking about research evidence and what you want to do with that is that studies, have to be well designed in order to be like correctly applied. And there's lots of factors that go into what makes a study well designed. First of all, studying a large enough number of people so that whatever the outcomes are, whatever they determine as part of the study is what's called statistically significant. So, meaning that what they've determined as what the outcomes are, what the evidence shows, it's not just random. It actually is indicating that something, say, is better than another thing, or that there's actual meaning behind the study. And also, studies have to be designed to take into account biases and other aspects of your life or the people who are participating and strip those out so that we can tell, is it the treatment that's making this, the difference in the person that's participating, or is it something else entirely? I mentioned the gold standard before. What's called a peer-reviewed study is really kind of the gold standard of evidence. So what that means is that the publication that is publishing the results of the study has been looked at by a number of different peers, a number of different people who are experts in these fields. And they say, yes, the study team that designed this study did a good job, that they interpreted the data correctly, that they presented it well, all of those things. And so PubMed and other places will show you primarily peer-reviewed studies. So that's a great place to start. But I'm hopeful that in the near future, we'll have opportunities where information will be more readily accessible. And always take that information back to your trusted source. Talk to your healthcare team to figure out how to interpret it and apply it to your own situation. And I just want to say that even though people are well-meaning, like your best friend's mother's cousin who's telling you about something that they heard that so and so did, they're well-meaning folks, but they're not a great source of information. First of all, it's usually one person. It's very far removed from a well-designed study. So you can thank them for their interest and maybe bring it up to your healthcare team, but that kind of information that you hear as a one-off isn't something to really hang your hat on. So next slide, Krista.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thanks. So how do I decide if I want to participate in research? And if I do, how do I get started?
Yeah. So I loved what Kathy said at the beginning about how research is really the key, right? And so it is the key to faster diagnoses and to more effective treatments and ultimately for curing the disease. And so at Accelerated Cure Project, we really want to talk about and communicate that there's so many different kinds of research that find the one that appeals to you, right? So you can do something like answering surveys. You can be in sort of a research related kind of initiative where you're part of a focus group or a council, all the way to interventional studies, things that require like exercise or even a pharmacological treatment. So there's a huge range of possibility here, and we like to think that there's something for everyone. And so really encouraging folks to investigate that. Clinicaltrials.gov is the place where all clinical studies need to be listed. But again, kind of like PubMed, it's not really written for the person like me, the lay person. You can go there. That's what I've posted here on the left-hand side to show some outcomes. I looked up pediatric MS research to try to find some studies that might be active right now. And so it can be a little hard to kind of navigate through. So again, your trusted sources are the best place to go. Ask your doctor if they could do some researching or other healthcare providers. Go to the society. Come visit us at Accelerated Cure Project. Those sources are other places that you can find research that you can participate in. Unfortunately, I didn't find a ton of pediatric MS studies that were ongoing. I know we're going to talk about some in a little bit, so that is wonderful news. But we need more studies. We need more funding. We need more studies to get those done. And Kathy mentioned the consent process. So I want to assure you that the clinical trial process is set up to inform and protect you. And so if you're considering getting involved in a research study, if you found one through your doctor or through clinicaltrials.gov, know that there's an informed consent process. They're going to explain to you everything that will happen in the study. And that is your opportunity to ask as many questions as you need to ask to feel fully aware of what's going to happen in the study. And you can always say no, because you should never participate in a research study if you don't feel really confident and comfortable about what's going to happen. Next slide.
Great, thanks. So, Sarah, tell us a little bit more about what role I Conquer MS plays in pediatric research, and maybe also taking a step back, how I Conquer MS is affiliated with the Accelerated Cure Project.
Yeah, thanks. So, as Krista mentioned in my intro, I work for a nonprofit called Accelerated Cure Project, and our focus is on accelerating research. And one of the ways in which we do that is through an initiative that we launched 10 years ago called I Conquer MS. And what I Conquer MS is, it's a people-powered research network. And so it is people all across the world, but primarily in the United States, who from the comfort of their own homes elect to participate in research. So they sign up for I Conquer MS. If they see a research study that we're conducting on our network, they consent to participate in it. They answer questionnaires. Some people provide blood samples. And they're involved in other ways too. They're not just participating as research participants or subjects, they're actually research partners. So our members ask questions, they submit questions to us that they want answered by research. They come together with researchers and help design the studies. And then we have, like I said, we have work going on to help translate evidence that's generated from research into actionable insights for people living with MS. And we're doing that in collaboration with people living with MS. So that's what I Conquer MS is, a platform where you can be involved as a research partner. And so I Conquer MS is focused on adults, right? Kathy mentioned that there's different requirements for adults versus children participating in research. And so we launched I Conquer MS initially with just adults because of the complexities of engaging kids. And then a few years ago, we brought together a bunch of amazing kids and teens and their family members, and we designed I Conquer MS Kids and Teens. So it's a partner network to I Conquer MS. It's focused exclusively on pediatric MS research. We have young members that come in, they assent to participate, as Kathy mentioned, and then their parents provide consent. And it's to enable those young people who are living with pediatric MS to be research partners as well. We just did a really cool project last year that Krista was part of, where we worked with some of the members of I Conquer MS Kids and Teens, those young kids and their family members, to develop a research agenda to say, what are the questions that matter most to us that we want answered by research? And we took those questions, we worked with those kids and their family members to come up with a prioritized agenda that we're now giving to researchers and funders and saying, this is what matters to young people and their families who are living with pediatric MS. This is what they want studied. We need to move this work forward. So lots of opportunities to be a research partner through I Conquer MS Kids and Teens.
Great. Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah.
So, Kathy, tell us a little bit more about the role that the National MS Society plays in pediatric research.
Yeah, I'm glad. I'm glad I'm coming after Sarah because one thing the society does is to work very much with I Conquer MS and Accelerated Cures Project. So we work to develop partnerships and support in the pediatric MS research community. So this includes funding so research can move forward, but it's also a two-way street. So we try to understand where the gaps are and fill those gaps to facilitate partnerships between researchers, between researchers and clinicians, between researchers and other funding agencies or other not-for-profits like Accelerated Cure Project. The Society also wants to facilitate connections in the pediatric MS research community. So we host educational programs for providers to be sure that pediatric researchers have a network to grow their understanding and their research about pediatric MS. We also want to be sure we're helping to inform clinical care through evidence-based research. So it's important to keep in mind that pediatric providers, physicians need to stay abreast of new research and apply that to their clinical practice. And so how they do that is based on largely on their local network. But because because MS patients are so rare, having a larger network is really critical to be sure that providers are aware of what the latest research is, what the benefits are, give providers a way to learn what's newest in the field, and then hopefully they can apply that to the children that they treat. The Society is also very active in advocacy for pediatric MS research. So the Society has a big focus on advocacy in general. And we have found that connecting with legislators to share new research has a lot of benefits for the MS community. One example is even having researchers work with the Society and other government agencies to facilitate approval and coverage of new medications. Really, it takes a community to advocate for the importance of this and to work towards getting coverage, insurance coverage for it. And last but not least, of course, the Society provides funding. So we want to facilitate new progress. So it's not, the Society is not the only funder out there, but our goal is to find the best research, and that includes pediatric research, and fund as much of that as we can, and even partner with other funding agencies like the NIH or the Department of Defense, both of which do fund MS pediatric research as well. So another thing that the Society funds is the network of pediatric MS centers. So I was going to ask Shukla if she wanted to come up and share, Dr. Shukla, your experience with this.
Yep, absolutely. So I am a part of one of the centers that's a part of the network of pediatric MS centers. And so the mission of the network is to discover the causes, investigate determinations of remyelination and neuroprotection, and basically just advance therapies and improve the outcomes of those with pediatric MS. And it's really nice for us, especially because MS is so rare in the pediatric population, because it gives us, other providers, other physicians that are experienced in this, in the field, but also a way to do more high impact research because we have more patients, more data that we can look at, more data from those patients that we can look at. So it's a multi-institutional collaboration that really allows us to look at more, kind of information and do more higher impact research. There's 12 clinical centers around the US, and then there's a data center that helps us with all the data analysis and, kind of keeping things in the registry organized. So this is just one of the people that's over at the data center, and it's actually really incredible. I recently did a project of my own, writing up some data from what we have in the registry, and it was incredible to see the number of patients and the level of excuse me, sorry, and the level of data collection that we have from the network. And so being able to use that higher powered data has been great, and the people over at the data center help us with that collection. So these are the 12 centers that we currently have in the network. And then there's the data coordination center over in Utah. And we are, I believe, looking to add more centers as things continue to grow, but it's also a little bit difficult because of the amount of information that's collected from the patients. The other thing that the network of pediatric MS centers does that's wonderful is the difficult case webinar. And again, some of us don't have a big kind of MS population where we are, or don't have colleagues to kind of run cases by. And so this has been one of I think one of the things that I like the most. If there's a difficult case, you submit it on the difficult case webinar. Of course, no patient information is shared and things like that, but you're able to basically get a panel of experts to go through a patient case with you, give you ideas on what they may do at their center, think about different diagnostics, different therapeutics. And so this is one of the things from the center that I think is clinically kind of the most useful and the most gratifying for us.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Dr. Shukla. So I know everyone here is interested in current research studies and the information that is being produced now that might impact the lives of kids living with MS now. So Kathy, can you tell us a little bit more about some current research studies?
Yes, I would love to. So I focus this on a couple of researchers that I think are doing interesting work. It's not really focused on medications. I will say it's focused on other behavioral modifications that can improve a child's life. So I'll start from the left. Dr. Ann Ye is a professor of pediatrics at the University of Toronto and the director of the MS program at the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto. And she developed a study that she titled Social Network Characteristics and Their Relationship with Physical Activity in Children with MS. So let me give you a little background to understand where she's going with this. So physical activity is a modifiable health behavior and has been found to be associated with improved health outcomes in children with MS. Other studies have identified that associations between the presence of social support and physical activity in children and youth is a positive thing. And that social support itself influences health promoting behaviors like physical activity. So she was interested in these social networks, and I was curious what she meant by that. So characteristics of social networks include this, like the size of the number of people that you know, the types of social support, as in emotional support, financial support, life advice, physical or health support, and camaraderie. So doing things with friends. And these are these are all part of what she's talking about in terms of social networks. So the goal of the study was to better understand the associations between social network characteristics, the ones I just talked about, and physical activity in children with MS. So they evaluated a group of kids. They asked them to complete a number of questionnaires. So responding to questions, and it was all about their social network and their physical activity. And they had two groups of kids, one with MS and one with kids who have another condition called mono ADS, which is just children who experience a single episode of neuroinflammation. So the big difference between the two groups is the kids with MS have problems that might go up and down over time, and the kids with this other condition don't. So they were similar, the two groups were similar in what we understood for their social network characteristics and their physical activity. But what they found with their analysis is that those kids that had a higher level of physical activity, those kids had also larger social networks, more emotional support, more camaraderie, more network members who had post-secondary education, and members who exercise 3 to 4 times a week. And these associations were not found in the children with the other condition, the mono ADS. So they found strong associations between higher levels of physical activity and a greater number of social network members that exercise. And this finding is consistent with studies that have evaluated even the importance of parental modeling and physical activity level, and found that positive associations between parental modeling, defined as kind of perceived parental physical activity, and greater physical activity in children was really positive. So the bottom line is we being aware of these social network characteristics may help us understand health behaviors in children with MS, and then be able to modify some of those health behaviors, has the potential to improve the physical activity that children with MS experience. So I'm going to go on to a second study. I feel like this is a lot for 8 o'clock at night. So I'm on the East Coast. I don't know wherever all of you are, but I wanted to share two other studies. So one is Dr. Lauren Krupp. She is a neurologist and the director of the MS Comprehensive Care Center at the New York University Langone Health. She had a very different idea from Dr. Ye. She wanted to look at cognitive functioning in pediatric MS. So the objective of this study was to define cognitive involvement in children with MS relative to adults with MS. And the study wanted to advance our understanding of how we measure cognitive performance in children and adults with MS, as well as children who don't have MS, and we're a group of healthy controls. So participants were asked to participate in a couple of tests that test their cognition. And what they found is that the pediatric group versus the pediatric group of MS kids versus healthy controls didn't differ in their composite scores on these cognitive tests. And the kids with MS, as well as the adults, didn't differ in their disease duration. And those two things are important because what they concluded is that pediatric MS patients don't differ from healthy children in their cognitive screening performance. And they perform better than adults with MS. And so this is important because they find that similar impairment rates between people with MS and controls suggest that cognitive impairments reported in children with MS may not all be specific to the MS disease process. So there might be other reasons why there are cognitive changes. And instead of writing it off to say, well, this is just the MS, maybe the messages have it tested so we can understand if the child has a specific learning disability that can be treated and doesn't have to do with the MS necessarily, and understand a child's relative strengths or weaknesses as they grow, and we can treat those in a more specific way outside of the MS realm. Okay, one more I wanted to share. This is with Dr. Emmanuelle Wabon. She is a professor and neurologist at the University of California, San Francisco, and the director of the Pediatric MS Center there. And she, again, has a very different take on what she wants to study in terms of pediatric MS. She's very interested in associating nutritional intake with clinical and imaging activity in kids with MS. So as a little bit of background, there are increasing number of environmental and genetic contributions that are being found to contribute to MS. So understanding the role of nutrition in MS could maybe guide recommendations and even guide interventions. So she followed several hundred children with MS over time, and she had them complete a food screener, which kind of asked them to estimate the intake of various dietary foods, including dairy and fruits. And parents could help with this. And they recognize that this is not ideal, right? This is, it's hard to remember what you've eaten, how much you've eaten. But this is really this is the gold standard for nutrition studies, other than hospitalizing someone and feeding them just the right foods, right? So the idea that she could get 353 children in this study was a big undertaking. And what they found is that kids who had increased dairy intake, like 50% more than the recommended intake, they found associations with increased relapse risk, like 41% increased, as well as risk of progression. And they found that increased intake of fruit or vegetables above the recommendations decreased relapse risk, respectively. So this is important, right? So we're not saying don't have your children have dairy and only let them eat fruits and vegetables. It's important to recognize that in research, these are associations. They're not causative. So we don't know if one causes one another yet. And that will take another study to really determine that. But, and this association of dairy intake has been found before. But this study that I'm telling you about followed more kids for a longer period of time. So keep in mind that the authors made a big point of saying they're not recommending that you limit dairy to less than the minimum recommended intake, because there are potential negative impacts to that, to pediatric health, and also including, for example, mineral requirements like calcium are part of what you get when you are eating something with when you're eating dairy. So there are a lot of caveats, and I just threw out a lot of 3 very different studies. I'm hoping, though, it gave you the impression that there is research going on that is specific to MS, and that the National MS Society is funding all 3 of those studies. And results are slow in coming, in part because you need a lot of kids to be able to study something and come to a definitive understanding of something. But we are learning, and studies like the 3 I've shared here, we hope will be useful in designing better interventions and interventions that are safe for children and can really limit disability in the long run for our children who have MS. So I think that's all I was going to share. I have other examples if anyone else is interested, but I'll stop there because it seems like a lot for a Thursday night.
Well, great. Thanks so much, Kathy. Appreciate that. I think I can speak for both Sarah and I that those studies that you shared more about tonight addressed a lot of the questions that we heard coming up in conversations as we were working together with families to develop that prioritized research agenda. So hopefully that was informative for all of you as well. So from there, I would like to share some resources for kids living with MS and their families. Hope you take a few minutes to check these out. First and foremost is our Pediatric MS Resource Guide that can be found on our website. You can also view information about additional organizations that support youth and teens with MS and their families, like the I Conquer MS Kids and Teen platform that you heard about earlier. There's information there for financial resources for families impacted by pediatric MS, and of course, Walk MS and other activities that you can be engaged in to build community and connect with other people who know what it's like to live with MS. So the family member who registered you for the program tonight will receive links to all these things via email directly from me, but do not hesitate to reach out if you'd like to connect further. I do also want to call out our MS Navigator program. If there's ever a time when you have questions or need additional support, an MS Navigator is your first phone call. The Society's MS Navigators are skilled, very kind professionals who are supportive people that can help you work through the challenges and changes with MS based on your personal experience. Resources that MS Navigators provide can include emotional support resources, access and referrals to MS healthcare specialists, supporting working through health insurance options and benefits, employment resources, and more. So they can help you figure out what you need and how to talk to the right people to get that. You can talk to an MS Navigator over email, by direct message on our website, or you can call 1-800-344-4867 to learn more. They can help both parents and kids and give you resources for your whole family. They also do have MS Navigators who speak Spanish, if that is helpful for you. If you are a kid who wants to talk to an MS Navigator, please be sure to make sure that your parent or guardian says it's okay to do so. I also want to make sure that you know exactly where to go if you'd like to connect with others who are affected by pediatric MS. So first and foremost, if you are a teen or high school or college age student who has MS themselves, I would encourage you to check out our MS Youngsters group. They meet virtually on a monthly basis, and the group is led by a society-trained volunteer. You can also find them on Instagram at MS Youngsters. Parents are also invited to join our group just for parents of a child currently 25 or under who has an MS diagnosis. The group format rotates, so there's opportunities for connection, but there's also educational presentations that are offered. And again, they meet on a monthly basis virtually.